Good morning, everyone. It is Playoff Victory Monday on After Further Review. I'm Dave DeNatale along with Jay Crawford. And Jay, I don't know about you. There were many times last night and even maybe this morning where I sat and said, what planet am I on? What is going on here? An unbelievable, emotional night, a roller coaster night like every Browns game we've had this year, but a Browns victory.
Yeah, but first of all, Dino, good Monday morning to you. Good victory Monday morning to Browns Nation. This is 18 years in the making, really longer than that. You can go back 26 years, 94 season. It's unbelievable what happened last night. And this is, I swear to God, this is a true story. I woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning. First of all, I couldn't fall asleep. I didn't go to sleep until after 1 o'clock. I woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning and I literally had like a 15-second deal where I thought to myself, did that really happen? Was that a dream? Did the Browns really just punish the Steelers and drop 48 on them? And it took me a second to clear the cobwebs. And then I realized, yeah, this isn't a dream. It's reality. It happened. And now the Browns get the Chiefs next week. Dino, how about this? We're just a few years removed from 1-31.
Yes.
And we're today in the final 8, still alive in the hunt for the Super Bowl. It feels like it's too good to be true, but at the same time, we have waited so long for this, and we have endured so much heartache and pain and really end of the road feelings when it comes to being a fan. We deserve this 100 times over. So I'll probably, to quote the famous line from Chevy Chase in the movie Vacation, I think I'm going to need plastic surgery to remove my smile. I'm on cloud 10 today. It's not even cloud 9. I went up 1 to cloud 10.
I got to tell you, I'm going to give you another movie reference. The first half, and certainly the first quarter, but the first half, It felt like Ralphie taking out his anger on Scott Farquhar. In A Christmas Story, all the years that the Browns had been tormented by Ben Roethlisberger. I mean, to get 3 turnovers like that in the first half, especially something as crazy random as a bad center snap that leads directly to a touchdown. Jay, that's the stuff that happens to the Browns at Heinz Field, not for the Browns.
Yeah, 1,000%. In fact, when Pouncey launched the ball over Ben's head, I literally thought to myself, this is going to be different. Today's going to be different because that is exactly the kind of heartbreak that we've had to endure through the years playing. I mean, Al Michaels, I thought, was right on the money when he said Heinz Field has been a house of horrors for the Browns over the years. It's one of those places that, for whatever reason, when the Browns walk in there, just bad things happen to them. And 2 things came to mind as I'm watching the game. Number one, what a shame that this happens in the year of the coronavirus, when Browns fans can't be immersed in what was euphoric atmosphere last night. Because I know it wouldn't have been that way for Browns fans at Heinz Field, but they could have celebrated in downtown Cleveland. Downtown Cleveland would have been completely off the chain. And then on the other hand, I found myself saying, I'm always looking for that silver lining. I think you know that about me, Dino.
Yes.
And the coronavirus cloud kept us from celebrating like we wanted to, but at the same time, the coronavirus cloud that hung over Heinz Field also made last night possible. There were 2,500 fans there. It's so much easier to operate when you're doing so in front of a high school crowd as opposed to an all-world NFL franchise like Pittsburgh crowd. That I can almost assure you that when the tide turned, there were a lot of momentum shifts, but there were 2 times that the Steelers wrestled away the momentum. I thought when they scored the touchdown and then added that field goal in 28 seconds to go to half, I thought, oh boy, this is horrible, because now, even though it's 35-10, Mo is all in Pittsburgh. It's all in their locker room, and Cleveland has got to be thinking, what just happened? But the Browns, even though they weren't able to wrestle it away right away to start the third quarter, After the Steelers scored to make it a 12 or a 13-point game, I think it was a 13-point game, the Browns and Baker Mayfield pulled off what I think is the best drive I've seen, the most significant drive I've seen in my Browns lifetime. I'm 55 years old. The year before I was born, they won the championship. The Jets playoff win comes to mind as one of the most euphoric moments I've ever experienced as a Browns fan, but that was because we were down 20-10 late, and then you win it in double overtime. And in my lifetime, that's the signature win. Even though we had a couple of wins that put us in the AFC Championship game that you could argue were bigger, to me, I always point to that Jets game. Yesterday was bigger. It wasn't just about one football game for 60 minutes to advance in the playoffs. Last night was about squashing a 2 decades old narrative.
Right.
A narrative that the Browns are always going to be the Steelers' little brother, infant brother, not even worthy of running at their speed. Last night, they dispelled that 20-year narrative. They did it with that drive after the Steelers scored to cut it to 13. Baker seemed focused. They had some big third down pickups. They looked like a playoff football team. And they did it against a defense that we know is pretty damn good. And the Browns put 49 on them last night. And I know that, or 48, the 7 was scored by the defense, and some of the other points were set up by the defense. But it was a total team effort. And that drive, they stood up, they punched their big brother in the mouth, and they said, no more. We're done with this. We're done with this. We're not nameless gray faces. We're not the same old Cleveland Browns. I love Chris Rose. Chris is a big Browns fan. He's in the national media. He and I have been close friends for a long time. I'm watching him last night after the game on the NFL Network. And when he's doing the highlights, and I don't even know if the whole audience caught it. I caught it, and anybody else who's from Cleveland and knows he's a Browns fan caught it. But at one point, he's calling a Browns touchdown, and he said, Juju Smith-Schuster, you're right. These aren't the same old Browns. Or no. He said, you're right. These are the same old Browns. These are the same old Browns of the 50s and 60s that were winning championships. And I thought, Chris, that is so good. That is so perfect. The entire world went to bed last night and woke up this morning trolling Juju.
Yes.
And, you know, he might be, I understand that he is a pretty good guy. I've never met him. I know people that know him. I know he's done a lot of things for the needy, and I love that about him. But if there's ever been a lesson against showboating against your opponent that you haven't even played yet, dancing on their logo, all the TikToks, all the Instagrams, the nameless gray faces, they're the same old Browns. They were 11-0, and then his logo dances took off.
Yep.
And his mouth kicked in. And since then, the Steelers are 1-5. Now, I know they've got a myriad of other problems, but this is textbook example why you don't give your opponent bulletin board material. It's the dumbest thing you can do. The Cincinnati Bengals were so furious, they beat them. The Browns, I'll guarantee you to a man, even though the Browns aren't going to come out, all of them, and talk about it, every single man on that football team heard those comments. They were motivated by those comments. I don't know that a grown man can try any harder, but I can tell you they can be more focused. They can have that laser focus for 60 minutes. They wanted to prove the point. You're not going to talk about us like that anymore. You're not going to kick us around anymore. And for me, Dino, the image of the night that is just burned in my mind was the image of Ben Roethlisberger crying real tears, sitting on the bench after he just broke 2 NFL records. He set an NFL record for the most attempts in any game. I mean, that's a high pitch count for a starting pitcher.
Yes.
And he threw for more yards than any quarterback has ever thrown in a playoff game. And usually that means you're trailing big and you have to do that. And it usually comes in a losing effort. So here's a guy who just set 2 NFL records, and he's sitting on the bench crying real tears and I don't want to start any rumors. I don't want to speculate. I know he said after the game he still loves playing this game, but I couldn't help but wonder if Ben knew coming into this postseason that this would be his last dance. And as he's sitting there on that bench, coming to grips with what just happened, that his entire NFL career wasn't flashing before his eyes, knowing that his career was built in the regular season on destroying a rivalry. Single-handedly, he destroyed this rivalry because a rivalry takes two to tango. That's why the Buckeyes and the Wolverines rivalry is tarnished over the last decade, because the other team's got to win. You've got to hate the other team as much as they hate you. And it's been hard for us to fully dial into the rivalry because the Steelers haven't hated us like we hate them because we're their little brother.
Right.
They beat us around the park. Every Sunday they play us. So I couldn't help but wonder last night if that's the last page of the Ben Roethlisberger book, if that's how his career ends. And I like Ben. I've known him for a long time. I don't want to see his career end like that. But if it does, there is a bit of poetic justice that the team that he so manhandled during his career ended it in a playoff game at Heinz Field with 2,500 fans. It's incredible to me. And I don't know that he's got another season in him. I really don't.
Yeah, you talk about a team that's got an uncertain offseason. That's the Steelers for sure. So many things with the Browns to look at what they were missing last night. What do you think was going on in Kevin Stefanski's basement throughout the course of the night? I think it was Darren Revell, your former colleague Darren Revell, said, man, they should have charged $19.95 to live stream the Stefanski basement. He wasn't there, but credit. I mean, he got his team ready to play to the point where he can hand it off to Mike Prefer and to Alex Van Pelt and Joe Woods and say, all right, guys, this is the plan. Go carry it out.
Yeah, I want to stress this point. Kevin Stefanski wasn't in the building last night. And for those 3.5 hours, he wasn't involved in actually what was happening. But make no mistake about it. What the Browns did last night offensively to the Pittsburgh Steelers came from the genius mind of Kevin Stefanski. He did everything but drive the final nail in. He laid the foundation this week. The way they had to prepare via Zoom, it's unbelievable how successful they were able to be. Dino, essentially, they've spent 3.5 hours practicing football over the last 2+ weeks.
Right.
They've been working hard on the Zoom meetings. I love when NBC showed this is what the Browns did this week on their Zoom calls. A play call would be held up, and each player in the Zoom meeting was responsible for drawing out what their individual assignment was. They took lemons and they made lemonade. And I don't know that any team in the NFL has done that better this year than the Browns. I know the Ravens had a monumental outbreak and they had a lot of strife early on, and now they've sort of put it together. But I'm telling you, we can't understand how much preparation goes into an NFL football game as mere mortals. We can't. Even though that we're in the media and we've been inside meeting rooms and we've been at practices and we've been around the facilities of NFL teams for our whole lives, we still can't grasp and get our minds around what a difficult task that is. This isn't a final exam. This is the bar exam. And you essentially walked into the bar exam without opening a book. And they played it masterfully. Their preparation this week is perhaps the most monumental, incredible preparation for a football game I've ever seen in my life, any level, college or pro, simply because the roadblocks they had in their way, the players they were without, they didn't get to touch a practice field until Friday. It's just, to me, it boggles my mind how they were able to go out there and do that. And I think what that speaks to is what Kevin Stefanski has instilled in this football team since he took over the reins last year. He has told this team, you're better than your record. you can break out of this slump. We can win with this group. They heard it, and they heard it, and they heard it, and then they saw it, and they lived it, and now they believe it. They believe they can. And before anybody ever accomplishes anything, you have to visualize it. You have to believe that you can do it. And this football team ran out through the tunnel last night, and they had every belief in the world that they were going to win that game. Where in past years, regular season or not, when they went onto that field, in the backs of their minds, in the fronts of their minds, in their entire minds, was the notion that things are going to fall apart like a house of cards, and we're going to crumble. And instead, that happened to Pittsburgh with the opening snap of the game. It really was a table-setting omen. And also, think about this. It was perhaps the two surefire Hall of Famers on that Steelers team.
Yes.
Pouncey and Roethlisberger.
Yep.
And essentially, they're the guys that that started the snowball rolling. And it really was incredible to watch in real time, because very few things surprise me in sports anymore. And when you've done it as long as I've done it, and you've covered all the different events, it's almost impossible for me to look at something and say, I don't even believe what I'm looking at. I can't believe what I'm seeing. But that's exactly what I was saying all through the game last night. I cannot believe what I am looking at. And it just, look at this. We were prepared for last night because of what happened against the Dallas Cowboys earlier this year.
Yes.
That Cowboys game was a dress rehearsal for what happened last night. It was 31-7 Cleveland at halftime against Dallas. It was 35-10 Browns over the Steelers at halftime. So there was a 24 and a 25-point lead. And then came the inevitable. You knew it would happen. The storm from behind comeback. I believe Dallas scored 24 fourth quarter points.
Sounds right.
So you had 31-7 surefire win that turned into 49-38. And last night's score was 48-37. Both quarterbacks threw for over 500 yards. It's incredible, the similarities between the Steelers game last night and the Cowboys game earlier in the season. And I honestly believe that the Browns, having gone through that with the Cowboys and also with the Titans to a certain extent, they had a big lead and we saw it disappear. And now we're doing that math in our heads that Browns fans are so familiar with. Okay, so they need a touchdown and a 2 and a touchdown and an extra point, and there's 7 minutes to go, and you start doing that reverse math. I think because they had been in that kind of a game with Dallas and they had been in that kind of a game with Tennessee, they were ready last night, and they were holding the boulder from crushing them. They were pushing it back up the hill. And it's one of the most euphoric sporting events I've ever seen in my entire life.
When Chubb gets that touchdown, as they perfect call, by the way, the Steelers are coming in on the blitz, so you flood Chubb out to the spot where the blitzes are coming, little screen pass, and he takes it in. At that point, I mean, there's still a long ways to go, but at that point, I'm like, this is different. This isn't what we've seen, with the exception of those games you mentioned earlier this year. But in the past years, we wouldn't have seen that. We would have seen at 35-23, the Browns go 3 and out again, and the Steelers with all kinds of momentum. And maybe we're at Heinz Field in a non-COVID world. You have the terrible towels going, and they're playing Renegade, and you're completely psyched out. But none of that happened with the Browns because they worked it down, as you said, one of the best drives we've seen by the Browns ever. And the simplicity of it, though, let's get the ball to Nick Chubb. They're closing down the running lanes, so let's get it to him in a screen, and he rewards them with a touchdown. I love it. I thought that was fantastic.
The play was perfectly called, too. The Steelers' defense was in the kind of defense that you could do that. And on the earlier Chubb touchdown, I think they had 10 or 11 guys at the line of scrimmage, and everybody was manned press along the wideouts. Were all manned up in press coverage, and you knew that if they could hit something, there was no one back in the back end of the defense. You know, that you're not in a cover 2 situation. You don't have that safety net of having a safety or 2 deep. And when the ball was complete and he broke it, his first touchdown, and I remember thinking at the time, it was the perfect play call at the perfect time. They caught the Steelers in the right defense. And if they can do that 2 or 3 more times, they can turn what looks like a routine handoff or a routine screen into a touchdown. When the third quarter was unfolding, what scared me more than anything, I knew the Steelers were going to score. In fact, I said at halftime, I don't think the Steelers are going to punt in the second half. I don't know how they do. It's 4-down territory the rest of the game. You're down 25. And I think they may have had 1, maybe 2 more punts the rest of the game. But I said, I know what's going to happen with the Browns defense. The Steelers have figured it out. They're going to score, and they're going to score a lot. This game is in the hands of the Browns offense. Yeah. Can they counterpunch with the Steelers offense? They don't have to score every possession, but they have to score every other possession. And they don't need touchdowns, but they need points. Even if it's field goals, you need something. The third quarter happens. The Browns open 3 and out, 45-second possession. They get the ball one other time in the quarter. 3 and out, 1:40 off the clock. They possess the ball for 6 plays, 2 minutes in the second quarter. That's when I realized we're at the apex right here. This is the crossroads. Are they going to continue down the same old Browns path and roll over and play prevent and give up large chunk or, a bunch of small chunk plays to get one large result? Or are they going to stand up and knock the narrative out of the sky? And that's what they did. And after the Steelers scored, I mentioned that earlier touchdown. I think there was 11 minutes to go. After they scored that touchdown, now I'm thinking, okay, in 2003, the Browns were up 13 points with 4 minutes to go, and they lost the game. And now I'm looking at the scoreboard, and they're up 13 points, but there's 11 minutes to go. Yes. And I literally was like, I don't know that they can hold them out. I don't know. And then Baker takes this beautifully orchestrated drive, and they go down the length of the field. More than anything, it consumes clock. Yes. It takes precious seconds off the clock. I was screaming at the television as we're watching it because Baker was snapping the ball sometimes with 15 seconds left on the play clock in the fourth quarter. And I'm screaming, let it go down, let it go. Yes. 4 of those plays is a minute. 8 of those plays is 2 minutes. How valuable is that time going to be at the end of the game? Yep. It all worked out. The Browns move on. And look, I know Kansas City is vaunted. I know they're the defending Super Bowl champs. They have the defending MVP for the Super Bowl. I get all of that. Dino, I meant to look this up this morning and I haven't had time yet. Do we know what the crowd will be at Arrowhead next week? Do we know what Missouri's restrictions are?
Boy, because I remember because the Chiefs had the first game of the year, on Channel 3, and I remember there were fans. I don't off the top of my head know what their variance is.
It's going to be interesting to see because if it's 25,000, that's going to be a problem. I really believe that'll be a problem. If it's 8 to 10 or 12,000, I think it'll still be a problem. They're still going to make noise. But not so much noise that the Browns won't be able to operate. Not so much noise that the Browns – because last night, what I love about what we're able to witness this year while we're watching games, and some of the networks do it better than others, I do think NBC does a terrific job at riding the crowd sound. At Fox, I can't stand. ESPN, I can't stand. Enough with the fake canned audio. I feel like I'm watching a bad sitcom with a laugh track. We know there's nobody in the stands at Seattle, yet at times – the audio was so jacked up, I couldn't hear Aikman and Buck.
Right.
Enough with that. What I love about the way NBC does it is their field mics are bringing that field audio home. And so if Baker is calling an audible or he's pointing out something to the tight end, we can hear it. Right. And so I think that it takes us inside the game in a way that only NFL Films has been able to do in the past. But that's always after the game is over. It's not nearly as dramatic because we know the outcome. watching games this year, when you can hear the crowd sound, when you can hear the players' discussion, it's pulling back a curtain that we've never had access to before. And so kudos to NBC for allowing us to hear that and not piping in this horrible canned audio, which is just, it's awful. It's absolutely unwatchable at times. And I'm glad I didn't have to suffer through that last night.
No, I would agree. As we start thinking about the Chiefs, the big topic this week is going to be who's coming back off of the COVID list and who's available. Schefter already tweeted last night. We'll hear from Kevin Stefanski in about 30 minutes, but the expectation is he will be back on the sidelines. We'll see about Bill Callahan. By the way, props to the Browns offensive line and the pass that they had last night. Pretty amazing. But, it's Bitonio and Ward and Hodge. How bad is Conklin hurt? That's going to be I think the big thing this week is how many of those guys that weren't available last night might be available to take with you to Kansas City.
Yep, that's a huge storyline. Absolutely, Dino, you're right. And what I'm hopeful, and this is, we don't know how sick are these guys. We don't know. How is Bitonio? How is Ward? First of all, my hope, my sincere hope is that they're not suffering and they're not experiencing a lot of symptoms. And even Coach Stefanski, I know that last night they said he had temporary loss of taste and smell, but other than that, he's doing fine. He certainly looks fine. So first and foremost, let's hope that these guys are well and healthy and they fully recover. I couldn't help but think last night, though, as we're watching, and I don't know if it's because he's just a max effort guy, but Myles Garrett is, hands on hips, hands on knees, taking plays off. He looked like somebody who was at the end of a 26.2 mile run. And I don't know if that is still the lingering effects of COVID, because it obviously affects your respiratory system, but he seems like he just doesn't have his wind all the way back. So will Ward, will Bitonio? I guess everybody responds differently to this virus. But I will say this, if the Browns come into this game and they're 100%, which hasn't happened for this football team in a long time, as 100% as they can be right now. Obviously, we'd love to have OBJ. I think Delpit would have been a fantastic addition to that defensive backfield this year. Vernon now gone. But if you can get everybody off the COVID reserve list and you don't have any concussions or hamstrings, I think Conklin will be able to play. But I don't know. I haven't talked to him. I haven't seen how he's responding, and I'm sure he'll get treatment all week. But we're going to need him. We're going to need every tool in the arsenal if we're going to beat Kansas City. And if you would have told me at the beginning of the season the Browns are going to play Kansas City in the playoffs, I would have assumed, it's going to be in the first round. It's not in the first round. We haven't seen Mahomes in how many weeks?
What, 3?
It'll be 3. It'll be 3 by the time he plays, right?
Yeah.
Because you got all this week. You had all of last week. He didn't play week 16 or week 17, their final regular season game. So he may have a little rust on him. Caution to the Browns. Even if you get up 28-0 on Kansas City, that game isn't over. We've seen Kansas City last year. They did it against, was it the Titans in the playoffs? They fell down huge too, and they came roaring back. If there's a team that's built to erase a 4-touchdown lead at any point, unless it's late in the fourth quarter, it's Kansas City. Their quick strike, their quarterback is an assassin. Whatever the task seems to be, Patrick seems to be tall enough to scale it. So I think if I'm Kevin Stefanski this week, here's my game plan. I'm going heavy dose of run.
Yes.
I'm thinking, and I like the Browns passing game is effective for so many reasons. Number one, we didn't see any of the deep balls last night, but what we saw were a lot of intermediate throws that keep the clock running and move the sticks. Baker was 21 of 36, I think, but he had a lot of drops. Hooper dropped a pair of them. Hooper dropped the touchdown pass. And in that moment, Dino, all I could think of was Dennis Northcutt meet Austin Hooper.
Yep.
Because I really thought that because, that game's over. If he catches that ball, that game is over. And I had said all week long that this game was a mulligan for the Browns organization, even though none of the players are the same. None of the coaching staff is the same. I don't know that there's an employee outside of Deacon and Donovan that were actually with the team in 2003 when that playoff loss happened to Pittsburgh. I can't think of anybody in the front office. I don't know. I know Doug and Donovan were. But this was a mulligan for the organization, and it was a mulligan for the fan base. They should have won that game in 2003. They should have won that game. They had it for 3 3/4 quarters. And it wasn't even Ben. It was Tommy Maddox, I think. But I was going nuts when Al Michaels said, I just got a note from our colleague Bill Cower, who reminds everybody that in that game in 2003, they were up by 13 points with 4 minutes to go or whatever, and they blew it. And the Steelers came back to win. As if we all didn't know and remember that. Al's got to remind all of us. So I'm going, oh my God, no, there's no way I can live through this again. There's just no way I can experience that again. And thankfully this morning we're not. Instead, Baker Mayfield is flipping his hat around backwards as a troll job to my buddy Colin Cowherd. I love that. It was just, they're being nice and subtle with their trolls, but they're trolling. Yeah. Particularly JJ, who I hate to say it deserves it, but this feels good. And I'm sure the rest of the country is looking at Browns Nation and our fan base saying, guys, act like you've been there before. Well, most of us haven't. Right. I mean, I've seen a handful of Browns playoff wins in my life. I'm 55. My son has been a fan his entire life. He was born in 1991. He hasn't seen a Browns playoff win until last night. He was 3 when the Browns beat the Patriots. So, right. For so many people, this meant so much. So excuse us, rest of the country, as we set down our drink to celebrate, because we deserve it. We've been through a lot. And I tweeted out last night, it feels like every single thing that has gone against us over the last 2 decades is somehow being washed away tonight by this day of reckoning, by this, karmic explosion that's been bottled up for so very long. And now we can say that we no longer have the longest playoff drought. How about this? The New England Patriots have a longer playoff drought than the Cleveland Browns. Boom!
Yeah.
Yes.
Love it. Yeah.
Sorry, Bill. Sorry.
Sorry about it. You're still going to Hall of Fame. You're getting a medal this week from the president, but we got you. We got that. Yeah, I guess to kind of put a bow on all this, I'm 46, you're 55. I mean, we both remember the 80s. And if you'd asked me before last night, the most significant, the most memorable, the most important playoff win or just victory for the Browns, I'm with you. I would have said the double overtime against the Jets, coming back from 10 down to force overtime, and then Mosley finally kicks the field goal in double OT. Browns win at the old stadium, Pandemonium Palace, as Nev Chandler used to call it.
Yeah.
Where do you put, as you think about it, where do you put last night? I mean, is it in your lifetime, does that become the pinnacle Browns win?
Without question. This is the most euphoric and, to me, significant win in the Super Bowl era for the Cleveland Browns. Despite the fact that it's a wild card game and it just gets us a chance to play Kansas City. That's all. Look, if the run ends Sunday in Kansas City, it ends. Right. But last night happened, and it can never be erased. And it was the perfect storm. It wasn't against the Titans or the Colts or the Dolphins or the Bills. It was against the Steelers. Yeah. And it was in Pittsburgh. So you talk about exercising demons. Ben, take that. Pittsburgh, take that. Heinz Field, you had that coming. So again, the symbolism of the win, the way they pulled it off, 49 points. If you would have told me before the game that the Browns were going to get 48 points, if you'd have told me before the game Cleveland's going to allow 37, I would have instantly said that's an L.
Lost.
That's an L. Because I thought that our magic number was 30. I thought if we get to 30, we've got a real chance to win. If we get to 40, we win. And we were able to do that. And I just think that, and I don't know what it feels like to measure this win against a 1964 championship. I imagine that would have been more symbolic. Do you know, Dino, that they didn't even have a parade downtown Cleveland for the Browns? It was such a different time.
Yeah, you couldn't watch it. You had to be outside of like a 60-mile zone because it was blacked out on TV. So you couldn't gather around and watch it with family and friends. You had to listen to it or go to Youngstown or something to go watch it.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. And to think that, 55 years later, what cities do for teams that win championships, it's keys to the city for life. You'll never have to buy a meal or a drink in this city again. It's a parade you think the Indians parade was big? Dino, I hope I'm alive to see the Browns post Super Bowl victory parade. I hope I live that long because it will dwarf every other sports parade in the last 50 years. It will be so massive. It will be, and I know that the Cavs parade was great and the time of year was awesome. It's warm. Who's not going to come out and celebrate with your shirt off and go nuts like Reed? But the fact of the matter is, Cleveland would not be kept away by freezing temperatures in a snowstorm in a parade in February. We'll show up. We'll show up and we will celebrate like you've never seen a city celebrate a championship. And I'm not predicting that's going to happen. I mean, the road to the Super Bowl for these Browns might be one of the most difficult for any team in recent memory. Steelers, Chiefs, I think Ravens or Bills, either one, but I think the Ravens are a dangerous team. I said that last Friday on Channel 3. I think the Ravens are as dangerous as any team left, and that includes Kansas City. And look, I don't want to see a Ravens-Chiefs game. I want to see a Browns-Chiefs game. And then I want to see a Browns-Ravens or a Browns-Bills game. But if it ends up being Kansas City and Baltimore, that is going to be an epic clash. Just an absolutely epic clash. What Baltimore's defense did this weekend to Derrick Henry, I think he had 40 yards on 18 carries or something insane like that. No, now against the Browns, he was pretty much bottled up, but that's because they were in such a hole. They just abandoned the run game. They needed throws. They needed touchdowns, and a lot of them. So Henry really wasn't a major factor in the Browns game against Tennessee, but they tried to get him on track. Baltimore's defense just said, look, if you're going to beat us, it's going to be Tannehill. It's not going to be your wrecking ball. We're going to contain him. We remember last year. We know what that feels like. We're not going to let that guy do that to us again. And so kudos to John Harbaugh and the Ravens for coming up with a great game plan and executing it and taking the next step. But, go Browns against the Chiefs. My goodness. And Dino, we get to do it all over again tonight as the Buckeyes play for a championship.
Yes.
I feel like I went 15 with Mike Tyson in his prime last night, and I have to bounce back in 24 hours and get in the ring with him again and watch this Ohio State-Alabama game tonight. But, hey, that's a good problem to have. I'm not going to complain.
I'll take that as the ultimate. You think the Buckeyes beat this Alabama team? I know they just while we'll run it. I mean, they did a number on Clemson and did what they had to do, but Saban has more weapons on this offense than he's ever had, I think.
Yeah, I think this is Alabama's best offense ever. Some argue it's as good as LSU's offense last year, which many consider to be the best college football has ever seen. I don't know that it's that good. It's good enough, and it's championship caliber offense without question. I think this is going to be a similar game to what we saw last night. Both teams are going to put up points. I think it's going to be a shootout. It may be whoever scores last wins. Can Ohio State win? Yes. In my view, if they play 10 times, I think Alabama wins 6. Ohio State wins 4. But they only have to play once, and they only have to beat them once. And I remember it wasn't that long ago, 2014, when the Buckeyes got on that late season roll. And even though it was Cardale coming in, they, dropped 59 on Wisconsin or whatever in the Big Ten championship game. And then they punched Alabama in the mouth, and few thought they could. Remember, Ohio State that year was a 4 because they had a loss. And they came out in the first game and they beat Alabama. And everybody was like, okay, I guess Ohio State deserves to be at the party. And then they had a pretty easy time of Oregon in the national championship game. And I don't know that our receivers are as good as that 14 team. Yeah. I think our running back, even though you hate to say it because Zeke was all world, I think our running back the last 4 games has been up to the challenge. He's been every bit as good as any 4-game stretch we saw Zach during his years at Ohio State. So I think they've got the quarterback without question. They've got the running back. I don't know defensively what kind of job they can do against that high potent, volatile Alabama offense. But I think the magic number for Ohio State would be 35. You have to keep Alabama under 35. If they do, I believe they can pull out the win. It's going to be a fantastic game. I think Ryan Day is the guy for the challenge. I love Ohio State season in many ways mirrors the Browns season. Their issues with COVID have been immense. Remember, we lived for about a month where it seemed like nobody from the Ohio State football Buckeyes would touch the football field this year. Remember? Big Ten canceled season. Yep. And they led the way. SEC and ACC said, nope, we're not going to do it. We think we can safely navigate these waters and get through it. Pac-12, Big Ten, jump back in. Then it looks like, well, Ohio State's only going to have 5 regular season games. The minimum was 6 to play for the championship. Season over again. Stake number 2 through the heart. Yep. Then they vote. They do the right thing. They realize eye test says Ohio State's the best team. They need to be there. They go. They win. They get Clemson. It looks like that stake through the heart number 3. Dabo disrespects his opponent. Yeah, they're number 11. Well, I think what he meant to say was they're going to be playing on the 11th. But Dabo will forgive you for that mistake. But so this is a team that seems to have a lot of lives, just like the Browns. Yep. So they're dangerous. They're the clear underdog. There's no question. But I think they can win if they play the perfect game and they find a way to keep Alabama below 35.
We'll watch that tonight, my friend. Great stuff. I can't wait to watch what's new at 5 o'clock. And I can see you already getting ready. My friend, I appreciate your time this morning on After Further Review. Great stuff. And go Browns, go Buckeyes.
Absolutely. Dino, thank you. Browns Nation, you deserve this. Live in it. Revel in it for a week. And then Sunday, it's game time all over again. We got to get this done. Got to get it done.
For Tim Crawford, I'm Dave DeNatale. Thanks for watching After Further Review on WKYC.